Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and today's video is part 1 of the detail on this classic and extremely rare 1967 Pontiac Firebird, which I really hope you enjoy. Now I'm going to start by saying that I love this car. The curves, body lines, chrome, and just its muscle car stance and sound is purely fantastic and such a rare thing to see on the roads these days. But I do need to draw your attention to the paint, or at least its finish, which for a brand new paint job that's just finished fully curing is so shockingly bad, to put it nicely. Now this car has been a restoration project for the owner over the past few years, pouring his blood, sweat and tears, as well as a considerable amount of his hard-earned cash to get it to this almost finished stage. But as anyone who's restored a car knows, it's never really finished. Now where I come in on this restoration project is to hopefully try and do a better job than the body shop to get the paint looking its best and then seal that finish with a protective coating. We'll have another look at the paint after the car is fully washed and decontaminated under some better lighting, but it's just so disappointing that any body shop or spray painter would hand over a car to the owner absolutely covered from head to toe with compounding swirls, holograms, loads of deeper sanding scratches, haze, and even overspray and compound residue caked into every single panel edge, trim and badge. There's just no other way to put it. It's terrible. But on the plus side, when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go. And there's definitely so much improvement that this paint can benefit from that shouldn't be hard at all getting it looking much, much better. So that's what I prefer focusing on, which is the huge potential for a complete turnaround of this paint's horrific finish. Now, where did I put my magic wand? Now as I start this detail by giving the wheels a good clean, I'm just going to give you guys a bit more info about this car and job. Firstly, I did largely fail myself in the pre-inspection and then re-inspection quote for this car. Let me explain, as it's a bit of a story. When the car first came in for a quote months ago, I did my normal inspection, but there was quite a few strange defects in the finish that the owner pointed out himself that looked like paint failures with weird textural patterns and patchiness. He wanted my opinion on them, and I straight up told him that he should really get the painter to fix them, as I wasn't sure that they were just clear coat defects and I couldn't guarantee I'd be able to fix them until I tried. So the owner did take the car back to the painter and it was worked on to rectify those issues. So in my mind I thought, well, if he gets that stuff sorted out then my job will be easier. But that was my real mistake. Now the body shop actually did address those issues, kind of, but they quite frankly hacked the finish of the paint in the process. and I really should have re-inspected the paint before proceeding, as it was definitely in worse condition than before. But that was completely my fault, and yet another lesson I had to learn. Now the thing is that a couple of days before this job, I had a no-show customer who not only didn't show up, but wouldn't answer his phone or return my calls, which I have to say is the first time that's happened to me in years. So after giving up on that job, I called a few clients who were booked in at later dates to see if they could bring their car in that week, and the owner of this Firebird said yes, which was great. Now when he arrived, I could sense a little frustration in the owner not being too pleased with what the body shop had done, as he kept on saying, well, it is what it is. And with me already losing 2 days work and just very keen to get to work, I didn't do a proper inspection to see what the body shop had really done, which I later discovered was just shockingly bad. So this job was booked in solely as a paint correction and protection job, with the addition of sealing the soft top roof, as realistically already being 2 days behind, that's all I'd be able to do to a high standard before my next booking, which I was completely upfront about with the owner even before he brought the car in. And I made no promises of delivering perfection based on what the paint was like, but I did promise the owner that I'd do my absolute best given the time that I had, as well as film the process which I previously said I'd do, and he seemed happy with that as well as my upfront honesty. I don't know if that was too much boring information for you guys, but I just wanted to explain that behind the scenes of making these videos, there's a whole bunch of things always happening that dictate or influence every specific job. Sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's time, and sometimes it's just unexpected events, lockdowns or restrictions that you have to adjust to on the fly. So I just wanted to be honest in sharing that things certainly don't always go to plan. In fact, some weeks they rarely go to plan, but that's no excuse to give up. It's just another challenge you have to overcome that will make you stronger in the end. So with the wheels given a nice decent clean, the next step was the pre-wash snow foam used to start this wash and decontamination process by softening any existing dirt, as well as breaking down any waxes or fillers the body shop may have left behind. It's actually been quite a while since I've done a convertible, but as I mentioned earlier, the owner did want the soft top protected with a durable hydrophobic coating. So to give the canvas top a good thorough clean in preparation for that coating, I firstly rinsed down the snow foam, then reapplied it, and then began brushing it clean while the snow foam was dwelling on the rest of the car. I initially used a smaller detailing brush, as although smaller brushes are more time consuming to use, they also force you to be more precise and methodical in your technique, especially around all the edges and seams. But then I followed up using a larger brush just to go over my work a second time and ensure it was given the best possible clean. Now, being that the soft top was only about a year old and not really exposed to the elements all that much, there was no need for stronger chemicals, but if it was an older canvas, I would have most likely used a slightly stronger all-purpose cleaner with my brushes. For the most part, you really should avoid using acid, iron or tar removal chemicals on soft tops and just stick to basic detergents or alkaline based cleaners, as those other chemicals can stain, etch or even make the soft top stink or take on the smell of those chemicals. And also just be careful not to use overly aggressive brushes, as they can scratch the material. Usually a soft to medium brush should be more than enough to get the job done. After cleaning the soft top and allowing the snow foam to fully dwell, I gave the whole car a very thorough pressure rinse down to remove as much dirt and grime as possible in a completely safe, touchless manner. As I always mention, the first pressure rinse down is one of the most important steps to help minimise wash-induced swirls. And I realise that this paint is already completely hacked up, but I'm not in the game of creating more paint defects regardless of what the paint is like. It's just a standard practice of care I follow on every car, as consistent processes tend to render consistent results. So changing things up to try and save a little time here and there usually ends up costing you more time or compromising the results down the track. Now, after the pressure rinse down, I could see that the soft top was looking beautifully clean and most of the surface dirt on the paint was also gone. Additionally, I could also see some mild hydrophobic behaviour, which is quite consistent with a new paint job surface tension, or maybe just some fillers, which was exactly what I was expecting. So there really didn't seem to be any overly durable or hydrophobic waxes or sealants on the paint, but rather just typical water behaviour associated with a new paint job. So taking all that into consideration, I felt like just a basic hand wash using my strip car wash detergent should be more than ample to remove the last of the dirt or any fillers sitting on the paint based on my past experience. The sort of protection or fillers that are commonly used by body shops don't tend to have much durability or chemical resistance. So in most cases, a good pre-soak foam followed by a good hand wash using just a strip car wash detergent should actually remove them. And being that the paint job is only 6 months old, there really shouldn't be any overly stubborn dirt or environmental fallout, as I also know that this car is always garaged and just a weekend driver. So I also wanted to point out that you should always ask questions about every car you detail and gather as much information as possible, as the more informed you are, the better you can predict certain things that will help you out during any detailing job. What I'll also mention here is that although there isn't any stubborn dirt or grime trapped in the panel trims or edges, there is lots of compound residue caked into those areas. I actually did off camera try brushing that residue off using a variety of chemicals and brushes, but in the end most of it just wouldn't come off. After 6 months, left on compound residue is usually really difficult to remove. Sometimes it can come off, so it's definitely worth a try, but in this case at least most of it was really baked on. So rather than wasting my time trying to brush it out, I decided that it would be easier and more effective to remove it with a fresh compound during the paint correction stage. Now after the hand wash and another pressure rinse down, I could only see some very mild hydrophobic behaviour which is consistent with a relatively new paint job. I also couldn't see or feel any environmental fallout or traffic film, which makes a lot of sense based on the information I had about this vehicle. I've also talked about this in the past, that brand new paint always has some mild hydrophobic behaviour by nature. So although your goal should always be to have the paint completely clean and bare before moving on to the paint correction or protection stages, just be aware that it's normal for new paint to have just some slightly hydrophobic behaviour. So being that there was absolutely no need or benefit to further chemically decontaminate or mechanically clay the paint, the car was firstly given a quick towel dry to remove the majority of the water and was then blown dry to remove the remaining trapped water in preparation for the correction stage. So with the car in the paint correction bay, my first pre-correction step was an IPA wipe down to remove any lingering detergent residue or water and dirt streaks that naturally occur after blowing dry a vehicle, as my goal before starting the paint correction is to always have the paint as clean and bare as possible so that nothing interferes with how my pads and compounds perform. Next was measuring the paint's overall thickness. Now, I bought my first paint thickness gauge about 10 years ago or so that's how long I've been measuring car paint. And over that period, I've never measured such thickness in paint as I did on this car. It was actually a first for me. The readings I was getting ranged from a few hundred microns, which is already extremely thick, to well over 1300 microns, which is where my paint thickness gauge maxes out. And as you'll see, I attempted taking many readings that were well beyond 1300 microns that my gauge couldn't even read because they were way too thick and just well beyond what any car paint should ever be. So what do these extremely thick paint thickness readings mean? Basically body filler, and not just a little, but way too much. Meaning that the panels weren't beaten straight and true as they should have been with just minimal filler applied, but rather just caked on with body filler to make the panels look flat and smooth. And this is not how good body work should be done. When you see crazy thick paint readings like this, an alarm bell needs to go off in your head, as it's just impossible to lay down paint that thick, and there's no question that it's body filler and a lot of it. Any painter that applies too much filler, or in this case doesn't at least sand it back to something more acceptable, is being negligent and trying to save time and money. Again, it's not my place to judge the body shop as I don't have all the facts. But based on these readings and all the other defects in the finish, it just doesn't instill much confidence or allow me to gauge any sort of understanding of how much all this thickness is actual clear coat, which is what I'm really interested in. The other issue is that with so much thickness between the bare metal panels and the top layer of clear coat, there's potentially going to be many issues, like questionable bonding with the primer, base and clear coat, as well as a marshmallow effect with the top clear coat, most likely making it very soft and sensitive to work with and difficult to maintain. So my advice is be careful in situations like this. Be gentle in pulling up your masking tape, and if you can, minimize its use. and don't even attempt to remove things like car badges, and just work on the paint with the assumption that it is soft, thin, and delicate. I want to be clear that that doesn't mean this is certainly the case, but a little extra caution is definitely something I would advise and that I will be personally employing. I know you guys have seen a lot of bad paint come into this shop and on this channel. As a brand new paint job, this has to make the top 3 worst new paints I've ever seen and maybe take the number 1 spot. I don't want to seem harsh because I'm not the sort of person that enjoys putting others' work down. I hate that kind of stuff. But you tell me, is this even remotely close to being an acceptable condition to hand over a newly painted car to your client? I'm not even talking about anything close to perfection, just acceptable or decent. It just blows my mind that this even occurred. So let's go through the specific defects in the finish of this paint. We have the usual dull haze and compounding swells, which really aren't anything out of the ordinary. But mixed in are some really deep rids or random isolated deeper scratches that I just don't understand how they could occur on a new paint job, as I can even catch some of those scratches with my fingernail. We also have the common rotary holograms, which I'm not too worried about, but what I am more worried about is all the machine sanding scratches left behind in the finish, and they're on every single panel of this car. I'm not exaggerating. But even more troublesome is the deeper sanding pigtail scratches that I know are going to be even harder to remove. There's also clear coat overspray on the back end of this vehicle, which is just weird, and I kid you not that you won't find one panel or trim that doesn't have compound residue caked all over it. Add a few water spots here and there, and I don't think there's a paint defect in existence that isn't on this car and to this severe level. But I think that's enough of that. I wanted to be honest about what this paint is really like, but it is what it is, and it's now my job to correct as much of it as I can. And like I said earlier, when you get paint that's as bad as this, it's easy to make a big improvement, and that's exactly what I intend to do for the owner, and hopefully do it with a smile on my face because it's my choice doing this work. No one's forcing me, and I prefer to be positive and in good spirits along the way. If you enjoyed this video and would like to say thanks and help support future content, you can do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ccad, which I'll have a link to in the description box, and thank you everyone for the support so far, it's hugely appreciated. I really hope you guys stay tuned for part 2 of the detail on this 1967 Pontiac Firebird, which will be the bulk of the work during the time-consuming paint correction stage. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed and found this video useful. Please share this video, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel to show support for this content, and I'll see you guys soon.